Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I welcome you all to this higher education dialogue being organized by the Indian School of Business in partnership with the Niti Aayog. I apologize for the slight delay in starting this program, but I promise you what will come ahead will be very interesting and worth your time. Thank you very much. The theme for this dialogue is revisiting higher education in India, global, local, and digital imperatives. At the Indian School of Business, we believe it is essential for institutions like us and all other higher education institutions to dialogue with diverse stakeholders in government, academia, business, and society. This dialogue is an institutional effort towards that goal. We are very fortunate to have with us this afternoon Dr. Rajiv Kumar, the Vice Chairman of Niti Aayog. I welcome you, Dr. Kumar, and thank you very much for joining us and for your support. Dr. Kumar comes with wide experience of having worked in the academia, government, industry, as well as multilateral institutions. He has worked at institutions and organizations such as ICRIER, NIFT, CPR, Department of Economic Affairs, Government of India, Asian Development Bank, CII, and FICCI. He also started a not-for-profit foundation called the Pehle India Foundation in 2013. He has served on the boards of the Reserve Bank of India and the State Bank of India. Dr. Kumar has a PhD in economics from the Lucknow University and a DPhil from the Oxford University. Sir, like I said, it's a great honor for ISB to share this platform with you and to host you on this platform. But for the fact that we are in the midst of the third wave, this would have been an in-person event in Delhi. But the way we have envisaged right now is to not stop the activity, but to do this dialogue spread over 2 days instead of a one-day affair. So we have day one this afternoon, starting with your session. And then the day two will be a week from now. And in all, we have 6 sessions covering different aspects of higher education that we feel are important for us to engage in a debate and discussion, bringing in diverse stakeholders. I also take pleasure in welcoming Dean Pilutla here, Madan Pilutla, who will sort of chair the session and be in conversation with Dr. Rajiv Kumar after his address. The topic for this inaugural session is the role of higher education institutions for grassroots impact. Just in terms of the format, Dr. Kumar will speak for about 15 minutes, followed by a conversation with the Dean. We will then open it up to question and answers from the audience. So to all of you who have joined us live, either on Zoom or on Facebook, we request you to type in your questions in the Q&A section of the Zoom platform or on the comment section of the Facebook live session. And we will take these questions as and when the opportunity arises. With those few words, again, welcome you all, and over to you, Madan.
Thank you, Guru. I'd just like to join Guru in welcoming you, sir. It's a pleasure to have you, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts on something that we think is a very, very important topic. So I'll let you talk for 15 minutes, and then we'll be in conversation. I just want to say here that the ISB is proud of the joint work that it does with Niti Aayog. We are honored by the trust that you repose in us on the different projects that we do with you. It's also a great honor to have the head of the Niti Aayog to start off what we believe will be a very interesting set of conversations about higher education in India and the role of higher education in ensuring that we make very even-handed progress in the forthcoming years in India. With that, welcome, sir, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Dean Pilutla, esteemed faculty, Guru, and students and others who are part of the audience. It's a real pleasure to be here and to work closely with the ISB and also to take part in the session. I compliment you, Dean, and others who select the topic about the higher education and its impact on the grassroots, because that connection is necessary, is essential, and is in fact something you could call it critical for the relevance of higher education and its contribution to our economy, to our society. And I hope that the 2-day session will produce results, and I look forward to hearing the conclusions and the findings that you come up with. I hope Dean and Pilutla and all of you will agree that the foremost sort of criteria condition for having an impact on the grassroots is that we should ensure access to higher education to our population. I think that's the important one, the access. And as some of the, we know that at the moment our gross enrollment ratio is 27%. The world average is 37%. And China is about 53%. The US is 88%. And South Korea, lo and behold, was 93% in 2015 and has now reached 98% of its population has enrolled in tertiary education. So we have a long way to go, as it were, because, and I'll explain, and we know the reason, but I'll go into some detail as to why we need this. And I think, and let me say here that we need this because the entire nature of the work, the entire nature of our, work, of our skills, of our industrial changes in this technologically turbulent age and stage, this is changing rapidly. And I think more and more it is going to be recognized by all that those who are not skilled and highly skilled or not without tertiary education will not be able to contribute or to the economy and get jobs that they want. So I think it is with this, it is because of this that our national education policy has targeted the gross enrollment ratio of 50% by the end of this decade. Now that implies that we need to create 35 million more seats in higher education. And this is despite the fact that today we have about more than 900 universities, approximately 39,000 colleges, of which I'm told there are 3,000 plus management schools with an enrollment of about 2.5 lakhs. But we are still far short of what we need in terms of meeting even the national education policy target of 50%. And the surprising thing is that the enrollment in higher education has stagnated for the last 3 or 4 years at around 42 million students. Now that's something which is quite inexplicable, and I will appeal to the researchers in your in your school to try and figure out as to why this is happening. Why is it that higher education, at a time and at stage of our economy where it should be attracting more students and more people, there seems to be some kind of a despair or some kind of a turning away from higher education. And if you look at the chart, this is what you see very clearly is going on. So now that's something that we need to look at. And it is very clear that these 35 million extra seats are not going to come from brick and mortar, campuses. They'll have to come from hybrid, campuses. They will have to come from what are called a brick plus click campuses, with distant learning, with open source learning, with hybrid sort of learning. And of the 27% which are enrolled, only 10% today are enrolled in the open school, open distance learning format. And the problem also at the moment is, to the best of my knowledge, the distant format is taken to be an inferior format in our country at the moment. And those who can't get into the bricks, campuses are the ones who opt for, the sort of the open or the distant education format. Now this has to change. This must change, and this is where I think we need to revisit. We need to rethink. We need to sort of completely, as it were, put on our thinking hats and think very differently on a different paradigm of higher education in our country. And for both reasons, that we have to ramp up the access as much as we can, and secondly, that while ramping up, we have to design our MOOCs and our internet education and our and our open education, distant education in a very different manner. And I think this is the challenge that institutes like ISB face today, as to how they can take a lead in this respect and devise the curriculum and pedagogy, for us to do things differently as we are. So I think I am emphasizing the access part of it, because very clearly, if we don't have even the minimal access to tertiary education and skills and learning and whatever, I don't think we will be able to have the required impact on the grassroots, on the changing of our, the citizens' lives and our welfare, etc. But the second equally important part, Dean Pelitula and others, is, I hope you'll agree, is the quality of our education, is the quality of our higher education. And this, I think, is, the latest figure that I have is from the All India Skills Report, which tells me that 46% of management graduates, as also 48% of engineering graduates today, are considered to be unemployable in our country. Now that's shocking, and I know that it's not true for the IIMs and the ISBs and the IITs of the country, but that those are becoming increasingly islands in a sea, in an ocean of mediocrity, if you like, and that just simply can't work. And I think this is why, again, I found an article about 10 months ago in the Indian Express, which sort of, which talks about the fact that, somebody, like the CEO of the Avalon Meta organization says that management degrees are no longer relevant for the industry. And somebody said that the only relevance management comes is because of the network of alumna that they create, and no more. And even that is now disappearing, because in the tier 2, tier 3 towns, or tier 2, tier 3 management institutes, that alumna network also is not of great relevance. So, and again, Dr. Tayal of the Indian School of Business and Finance has saying that we need to revisit the curriculum and the pedagogy and the case studies. All of these are required today, and incorporation of elements of programming, and I quote, incorporation of elements of programming, business analytics, machine learning, digital innovation will all have to be included in standard MBA education. Now, I think this is important, because no more is the management education required to be only marketing and organizational behavior and some economics and something like that, but you need to have these technology related skills to be taught to the management graduates if they're going to be relevant for the future. So I think this particular aspect of the quality that we have, I think, is important, especially today, because with artificial intelligence, deep machine learning, robotics, automation, the need for critical thinking, the need for design thinking, the necessity to deal with uncertainties, which are now increasingly upon us. I think all of that has to be a part of the management education as we go forward. I mean, the statistics is that in the US, people change careers, professions 3.3 times in their years. I myself, exemplify that. That from being an economist to working in industry and in the academia and multilaterals and the government. These are changes. Now, you need to have an education which makes you nimble enough, flexible enough to do this career hopping from one to the other. The days of lifelong careers are over. And is our education making us that, giving us that nimbleness and that flexibility is what I think we need to focus on. The ability to be retrained, the ability to learn on the job, I think is going to be a necessary part. The next issue that I want to raise in the few minutes that I have is that even the requirements of the industry and the societal demands from the industry to which all of our students go from management school is now changing radically. I think the old capitalist model of Adam Smith, which is based on profit maximization, of which I have been a student for a long time, is no more relevant. I think industry after industry is now looking at social impact investment. Industry is now looking increasingly at meeting the triple bottom lines of finance, of financial viability, of sustainability, and of societal relevance. I think that's the key. And I think to that extent, our students must also become far more aware of these facts. They must become aware of the fact that the way the Western model of consumption, the Western model of use and throw away, the Western models of mass consumerism is no more relevant. and neither is the model of profit maximization relevant. So entire marketing strategy may have to change to emphasizing reuse and recycle and go into a circular economy, etc. Now, that is where you will have the grassroots impact. My last 3 years, my big push has been on agroecology in Niti Aayog, whereby I'm emphasizing chemical-free agriculture for India, and agriculture which will make us, far more resilient. We'll use much less water, produce products which are much healthier, and therefore, become, and then can sequester carbon from the atmosphere into the soil rather than release more carbon into the soil. All of this will make education far more relevant to the society than what we have. And now this is, I think, and by the way, this is unique for India. We cannot follow the model that the other countries have followed of doing it today and retrofitting it tomorrow. No longer possible. All the other European countries, the North American countries, even our northern neighbor, China, has followed that model. We can't. We have to take a deep cognizance of the biting carbon constraint as we go forward. Now, does our education, higher education, take that into account? And if yes, how does that take into account, and what are the implications for that? I think it is extremely important for us to do so, because otherwise the consequences, as we know, are not going to be palatable even, and will not certainly be in sync with our own traditions of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam and so on. We in India cannot follow the model of man versus nature. We have to follow the model of man in nature and man in society, and individual rights and individual requirements will have to be subsumed in that context. This is where I think we need to also look at the fact as to how we deal with inequalities, and in our education, whether we bring in an empathy coefficient into the rest of it. Intelligence coefficient, emotional coefficient, but an empathy coefficient is what is required. Tomorrow, when most likely AI will take over some of our jobs and some people will remain unemployed for a transitory period of time even, will we have the capability to empathize with them and to work with them? Now that's important, because otherwise, already what we have is that our HDI rankings in the world, 139 out of 181, come down from 0.6 to 0.4 when you take inequality into consideration. Can we afford to continue to have a K-shaped recovery? And would we not have to look much more deeply at what's happening at the informal sector, what is happening to those who are not so well endowed? I think that empathy coefficient, I think, has to become a part of our management education, and I think that's something where we need to focus much more on. Finally, I must say that the need for much deeper research and R&D is probably required. And what kind of R&D? R&D and publishing of papers with a constituency in the West to our mind, or R&D which is rooted in our reality and its objective and its target is to change that reality for the better, and understand that reality which is in our country, and appreciate the diversity of our country, and therefore do R&D which is state specific, region specific, because each one is very different from the others, and therefore not try and find pan-India solutions, but try and find micro solutions and then maybe try and generalize for them. So I think we have a huge challenge on our hand, I must confess, at this point of time. The higher education has to become the driver of growth, is the engine of growth, but will become so and become far more relevant to the society if it responds to the societal needs that it's placed upon today, and does not see itself as an enclave within the country, which very often it does. And I think that's the key going forward. So I hope I've what I've said is relevant to the grassroots impact. And I hope, therefore, that higher education as we go forward will become more and more Indianized, but more and more modernized and more relevant. And I think that's the key. So, and I think that's our challenge, because so far we have tended to imitate the models of others rather than create our own models, which will be far more relevant to the grassroots than what we have today. Thank you very much for your patient hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kumar. Wonderful. It's short, but packed with a lot of challenges that you've thrown out to higher educational institutions in India, right? So let me just quickly, I'm sure there are a lot of questions that are there in the audience, but I'm going to react to a few of the things that you said, and then maybe pose a question, and we can take about five to 10 minutes. We can have a conversation, and then we open it up to the audience with your permission.
Sure.
Yeah. So for me, when I look at what the challenges that you've like very quickly and very effectively you've summarized is that there is a lot that needs to be done, and it needs to be done now. We don't have the luxury of time. That is the way that you're putting it out. You're saying there are so many people who have been shut out from education, but the world is changing such that the right kind of education is absolutely required if people have to get good outcomes in their life, and we can't shut out a large part of the population from access to very high quality education. That's the first point that you're making, and it needs to be done now. We don't have the time, and we don't have 20 years, 30 years to build more and more universities. We need to educate them now, which is why you're talking about online education as one of those solutions to this problem. But in order for us to do that, we have to get past the stigma of online education as a per second to what you refer to as the brick and mortar education, where people come in and where they get it. So that's the first big challenge that you've thrown out to higher education institutions in India is how do you scale up really quickly, but at the same time do it with very high quality so that people are not ending up with poor outcomes. That's the first challenge that you've put out, and I think it's right. So because technology is available now, what is required is for people to be trained, for teachers to be trained, so that the educational outcomes they fit in with the available technology that the pandemic has made available, but also there were pressures towards that over a period of time. The second thing that you talked about is that you said the education that we are providing now, for whatever reasons, is not making people who are ready to work or ready to be functional members of society broadly. That's what you're saying. It isn't just, you're not like relating it to a particular company and the needs of a company. You're not talking about vocational education. You're just saying that it's not fit for purpose because you're providing there are a lot of graduates who are coming out who don't have the ability to think, who don't have the ability to learn, which, as you rightly pointed out, going forward, it's not the declarative knowledge that they have. It's the ability to learn, the ability to adapt, the ability to make sound judgments, which is what is going to determine whether they're going to be successful or not. So that's the second kind of like an observation that you made. And you've said that let us look at our pedagogy, let us look at the way that we are teaching people, and ask ourselves honestly the question: are we doing that right? Are we doing that in that fashion? The third that you pointed out, and this is where I'm going to pick up, and I'm going to ask you this question, is where you said our education cannot be derivative from the West. It can. There are certain aspects of it which we can borrow, but there are other aspects of it which must be very much about the way the problems that we are currently facing, the issues that we in our state of development, and given what we are, the ethos of this country, the vast diversity of this country, not just in terms of language and so on, but also in terms of economic and social kind of like, the socio-economic disparities that are there in this country. So whatever it is being done here, is the education that we are providing, is the research that we are doing, is that sympathetic to the context is what you're asking. And I'm guessing that the answer that you're giving is that currently, no, that's not what we're doing. We're imitating the West is what is your answer, right? So that is what is the implicit assumption that you're making. So let me put out this question to you, Dr. Kumar. What is it from the West that we can borrow? What is it that we can borrow from there? What is it that we should not, that we should not? So if you can have your thoughts on that, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, it's a very well. Thanks for adding far more value to what I said than what I said, I suppose, in your summary. So that's the first part, and thank you for that. But secondly, also thank you for asking a very pointed and a very relevant question as to what we can and what we cannot. I think the first thing that, and I can only give it as an example, when I was doing my PhD at Lucknow University, then I was a scholarship holder for the ICSSR, and I would go every 3 months to collect my scholarship. And the head clerk in the registrar office, every time I went there, he used to tell me, they would euphemistically call everybody who was doing PhD Dr. Saab. Dr. Saab, you look to be a very bright student, you look to be very good. Why don't you try for the exams? And you know what he meant by the exams, the civil service. And then I would go another 3 months later or so on. He said, sir, if not the UPSC, then why don't you try for the PCS, and so on. And then finally, towards the end of my third year, sort of second year or so, he said, Dr. Saab, even sales tax inspectorate is very good. It's a great job to have. And I will remember I was doing a PhD. I was a scholarship holder, and I was a topper. And this is what I got. And then in reverse, I went to Oxford on my other scholarship. And the day I reached, the porter of my college, let alone the tutor, the porter of my college said, Dr. Kumar, congratulations for coming to Oxford to do your DPhil. This is you will contribute to the society. Now, why am I saying this to you? I think the first thing that we need to learn from the West, we keep parroting it in ourselves, but we don't do this. We don't give enough credit to our teachers, to our students, to our researchers, nothing of the sort. We keep talking about, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru, etc., whatever. But where is that societal recognition to our teacher? Where is the societal recognition to those who are doing R&D? The R&D is done by people who can't find any other job. They are the ones who opt for the R&D. Why is that? So what we should learn from the West is the importance they give to learning, is the importance that they give to higher education, which is why this is what Koreans have done. They've realized that, which is why is the stagnation in our higher education? It's shocking, isn't it? That's simply because children don't think there is any value to it, in terms of societal values, in terms of what they get. So that's the first big thing that I think we need to learn about that. The second thing that we need to learn from the West is, let me call it very broadly, a democratic mindset, where everybody is encouraged to ask the question why and criticize those who can't answer the question why, at any point of time. And this is not what we do very often, not in most schools that I know of. And I think that's the other big question that we can, that we can learn from. The third thing, again, it's related, is that, Koreans spend 4.6 or 4.5% of their GDP on research. Our total tally is 0.8%, of which 80% comes from public sector R&D, and not so. What we need to learn is that we need to talk to our industries, we need to talk to our firms as to why are they not doing R&D. In fact, I challenged when I was in CII as the chief economist, I challenged the National Council to say, give me examples, more than 3 examples of product innovation in our country since independence. And there wasn't much of a response. Now, I asked your researchers to do this for me, as to how many products have we innovated in our country, and why is that so? Now, and so that's the third thing that we need to learn, which is that the S curve is a genuine curve. We can't grow without it, and that's what is required to do. So that's one. And there I can go on and on, but last thing that I want to say is that we need to learn is that we should have a far bigger interaction between the government, academia, and the industry than we have today. We have to build platforms, and this is where I think ISB and MINITI should collaborate. And we have, for example, we are starting to do that. I've got a platform for 100 universities and 73 think tanks, etc. But we need to make this far more vibrant, which is what is the Silicon Valley about? What was Boston about? What was the Highway 125 about? And the whole Cambridge Massachusetts, thing is, and the Golden Triangles in UK is all about this interaction between the three stakeholders of the society. And therefore, and again, I think, because having been in the academia also, I think a large onus of that is on the academic institutions. They have to look out for themselves, look out of out of their campuses into what is the societal role, because that's what the others do. They keep connected all the time, and some management schools do, but unfortunately not most of the others are not. And here, I think what we need to devise is a situation where we can create a platform based on trust between the three stakeholders, and that's the trust which is which says that we are all working for the same objective, the same national objective, and we are working for the betterment of the last decile of our population. That's going to be the cutting edge. That's going to be the criteria. Are we working for the improvement of the last decile of our population? The World Bank economist Francois Bourgogne used to talk about that the best way to measure your growth is in terms of measuring the growth of the last decile. If all of us agree to do that, I think and that's something that again we can learn from the West, if you like. So those are the few things I'm not sure whether but one more, of course, is what I said already in my talk, is the need to focus laser-like on the use of technology in imparting higher education. And this is what they're doing. This is what they've done very effectively. And I think we need to do that as well as we go forward. After all, the entire Library of Congress is now digitized, and students in the National University of Singapore can attend classes under a tree. And why can't we do it? Is something that we need to look at. I hope that answered your question, Dean Pilitula.
Completely, Dr. Kumar. In fact, you answered a second question that I was going to ask also, but you answered that when you were giving this comprehensive answer. But I take away from that, the key takeaway from that is that we need, given the way that, given your own belief and my own belief, because I also come from that sector, about the worth of education the primary role for education in helping people come out of poor life situations. So that's when you talk about the last decile that is there. We need to get the best and the brightest of minds involved in education, is the point that you're making. The value that we are going to be putting on teachers, on education, on R&D and so on, that value should translate into the best minds coming in there and then applying themselves to educating the population. Yep. So, sorry. Go ahead.
Absolutely. No, I am agreeing with you. That's all. Sorry.
Yeah. So that's that exact. So we look at that, and I agree with you. So I completely. This is something that I believe at all points in time, that if we need to pull people up, so then we need a lot of people engaged in efforts that are like aimed. They put their brain power into trying to solve these important problems. Which is why I was also very heartened, and I completely, I agree with you that anything that we do by way of research or by pedagogy and so on, while we do want to have the rigor that is there in the West, we do want to have what you call the democratic mindset that is there in the West. A lot of the problems that we are going to be investigating, a lot of the issues that we investigate have to be ones that are relevant in this context. We cannot solve some of the other problems. We should be looking at solving our own problems, and that should be the bread and butter of all our R&D that we are attempting to do here. So I cannot agree with you more on this. So just picking up, sir, you did say that we need to try and create a platform there, and that was going to be my second question, but you came up and you mentioned creating a platform that is trust-based. So let me just ask you, right, in your own experience, because you've had this experience and you've had the experience in the West before you came here. So which is why you're able to talk about the collaboration that is there. Till now, what exactly has been the barrier that prevented these three important stakeholders, higher education, government, and businesses, from working with one another? What do you think? So one is you've said there is a trust deficit, right? So we're looking at that. We need to try to create that. But what else would you think on a practical basis, if we were to work under your guidance, under Niti Aayog's guidance, to try and create this platform? What are the things that we need to to worry about that we won't be able to, that we need to be taking care of in order to build a viable platform?
Yeah. I think we need to, I mean, I said it already, but the other way I can put it is that we have not, none of us have tried hard enough. That's the way to, that's what I would say. We are happy in our own silos, and and we don't recognize the importance of getting out of our silos. I was in Hyderabad recently for an initiative that I'm trying to launch. I have launched along with the principal scientific advisor, which is to bring all our science and technology institutes into synergy, to work with each other into a cluster. And we have appointed CEOs of in 5 cities, whose only job is to break the boundaries and get these science and technology institutes to work seamlessly across each other. Because we are very happy working in silos. We just don't want to look outside. And I think that's the thing that, today, this evening, we have a meeting with the Delhi cluster. And so so even academic institutions don't work with each other. And we have this, and we have a very hierarchical mindset within ourselves as well, which is what I need to work to, break through also, which is that, we'll only work with our peers, and our peers are only in the West, and the ones which are there in our country, they're not worth and then there's a hierarchy between the government and the academia and the industry, and and those who make profits are not worthy, despite the fact that our Prime Minister has said that those who make profits and earn values should get the highest respect. But so I think all of this is what is preventing us. But let me put it again, all of this can change if we try hard enough. If we make it a point in every institute, in your next meeting with all the IIM institutes, if you put out the suggestion that every management institute should have at least a fortnightly meeting of the 3 stakeholders, at least a fortnightly meeting, of the 3 stakeholders, wherever they are. Why shouldn't we do that? And let's see what happens. You've got the state governments who work with, the local governments who work with, the central governments who work with, everybody, and so therefore, let's start off with this, and then see where we go. And I'm sure once we start that movement, we will achieve it. And then work with institutes across, different, levels, as it were. We will help build capacity. We will learn from them, etc., etc. So I think that, to my mind, that's the way to go forward. And I'm sure it will happen. I'm sure it will happen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before I open it up into for the audience, I just want to say that there's one thing that you said, which I'm going to take to heart. We're going to do this. We will collaborate with all the institutions here in Hyderabad, but in the country. That is something that we want to do. What you said is that each institution should not be looking out for just its own glory. That's not what it should be looking out. That they need to work together. So thank you for saying that. I think that's well said. We'll take it to heart. And you also said that ultimately we're very happy in having some pockets of like elitism and so on. That's what when you're talking about hierarchy, and we need to break that down completely. And that's when you said work for the last decile, that's what you meant, right? So you said stop this hankering after that elitist tag that you want to do. Instead, work for the people right at the bottom in the last decile. Thank you. That's very, very helpful. Thank you. Let's open it up, Guru. Questions from the audience?
Sure. Thank you, Madan. Thanks a lot, Dr. Kumar. I have actually quite a few questions, but I picked 2 to begin with, and time permitting, we can perhaps take one more. There's Parag who's asking a question on, despite there's a lot of talk around sustainable business practice and life habits, there's not too many programs in universities around this to produce experts and expertise in this area. Is this because this industry has also not invested enough towards sustainable business practices, or doesn't academia really think it's important to invest more effort in this? I think this is a question perhaps both first for you, sir, and then maybe Madan, you want to also chime in. There's also a question, I think, in response to the first point that you had made about access. We have a viewer who's asking, what is the government doing to ramp up education infrastructure in tier 2 and tier 3 cities? Because bulk of India lives beyond the sort of tier 1 cities in some sense. We'll start with these two questions.
Yeah, on the first one about sustainability and social impact and so on, I think here the academia will have to lead from the front, and the industry will perhaps come, follow, as it were. And I think because what we need to do is to change the whole narrative around this, because so far we've had this narrative of mass consumption and throwaway and and so on, and chemical based agriculture and all of that. And I think especially the elite in our country, of which all of us are a member, will need to do this in the way we teach and and the way we conduct our narrative, etc., etc. I think, and by example, if you like, I think that's the for example, ISB can come up with an annual performance criteria of what sustainability initiatives it took, and in whatever way it is, whether it's used less paper or grown more trees or plants or conserved water and recycled it, etc. And I think a news item coming out of ISB will help change the narrative, and all the top management schools can get together to do that. On the industry side, I think some of it is beginning to happen already, because there are industries now which are talking about the triple or the bottom, triple of the bottom line or the double bottom line. But again, I think I don't know how to put it, but there isn't there isn't still a movement about this. There isn't a movement in the industry about this, and I think we need to create a greater consciousness. That's all that I can say at the moment. Maybe Dean Pilitula would want to add to this as to how we get more into social impact investment and create a climate for that. You can come
so
to
I'll just take a minute. Dr. Kumar. I mean, people are here more to listen to you. But so very, very quickly, I think what you said in the first instance, right? So that there is a need to change the narrative around consumption in the country. I think that probably is the biggest point that we need to make, right? So and it's already started with the younger folk. It isn't as though it's not there, So when we speak to the younger people that we interact with in lots of different contexts, they have more skin in the game, right? Because for them, they're actually they have a longer time horizon than us, and they understand the implications of climate change. They have implications of what is going to happen if consumption continues at the rate that it is. So there is going to be a grassroots. It is going to happen there, but they are the engines of the change that is going to happen. And what you said is ultimately it has to industry businesses will follow wherever it is that these consumers are going to follow. So if we change the mindset there, then we can get the change that we want. So I completely agree, So I completely agree with that. And then I think there's a second question also
on the second question about what the government is doing to expand the education infrastructure in the tier 2, tier 3 the towns and cities. One, as you know, education is a concurrent subject, and even higher education is predominantly looked after by the state governments, and that is therefore principally their responsibility, in expanding that infrastructure. And again, I think now increasingly the role of the government in expanding infrastructure is become less compared to the private sector. And I don't decry that at all. I don't discourage it at all. I think government's fiscal position being what it is, I think it is good that the private sector has stepped in and therefore and building the infrastructure. I forget the number statistics, but I think now probably the majority of our secondary students are going to private schools and not to government schools. I think at least the majority, if not even a higher number. And so that's what's happening. For the higher education, for the tertiary education, I think it's important now to bring about a change, which is the US or the UK US model, or even the Japanese model of trust, of non-profit making trusts and organizations coming into the education sector, the higher education sector. And I think this is where one can appeal to our own philanthropic traditions or all to our CSR traditions. And there is something of that already happening. Some of the best universities that you're getting today in the country are now based on that particular model. And I think that's the model to encourage, because that is where you will produce the right kind of, if you like, the ethos or the environment for pushing, the kind of higher education that I've been talking about, which is more focused on the societal needs and the needs of the large decile than otherwise. I think that's my answer to that. But central government itself is constantly ramped up. Now, I don't have the numbers just now, but if you look at the last 10 years, you will see that the education budget has been ramped up. We've still not reached 6%, which was the recommendation of the Kothari Commission way back, I think, in the 60s. But we are progressing towards that, despite the fiscal constraints that we have on our central budget.
Thank you very much. I think we are in the just last 2-3 minutes, but there's just 2 questions that I'm going to combine together. One is, you mentioned about the example of the Oxford University, and I sort of drawing from that, there's a question, the reception you had. So there's this question about what needs to be done to upskill faculty in higher education, and also what are your views on bringing an evaluation system for faculty? And I think the second question is to Madan, which is how far are institutions like ISB willing to cooperate and collaborate with second-rung management institutions? So those are the 2 questions. We'll sort of end with that. Sir, over to you, please.
On the evaluation of the faculty, there is one model, of course, which is the publish and perish model, which is the Western model, which is in some sense an evaluation, because if you don't publish it in reputed peer-reviewed journals, then you don't go forward. But that often also leads to a rash of sometimes second-rate publications, and also and so that's, I'm not sure whether that meets the test of evaluation. I would think a three-cornered evaluation of the faculty would be a good one. One corner is students, second would be the civil society, and the third would be some form of the government. And I think if each, and this is an idealistic statement, but if the faculty in our higher education institutes can be reviewed, or if can be at least exposed to feedback from these 3 stakeholders, and civil society can include industry, if you like, then I think will be a useful thing to do. And maybe what one can do, therefore, is to organize, sort of periodic interactions of our faculty with these outsiders, if you like, from outside the campuses, so that they can get a feedback on how they are performing. So that's the one part of the answer. But I think before that is also the big question about the ongoing training and skilling of our faculty, and which is, I think, very important. And I think that's something where all our institutes in everywhere, should have a process by which that becomes mandatory in some sense, about how people, how people refurbish their tools and keep up to date with what is going on. And I think that's the second one. And finally, I think I think the Koreans have mastered it, which is that, and in all aspects, which is that how does your how do the industry and the government relate to you? Do they use your services or not? And then if yes, to what measure? And maybe faculty can be ranked according to that. And if that is so, that will be sufficient evaluation going forward. But those are tough ones. And I'm not sure if I was in the faculty, which I was at one stage in my life, I would accept to have those things. But if we could do that, I think it'll be very good.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Madan,
difficult question to
sorry.
you.
So Guru, you had the question about to what extent. That's the question you want me to answer.
Yes.
Right? Yes.
Yes.
Not about faculty evaluation.
No.
Okay. We are willing to collaborate with anyone, Guru. You know that. I mean, that is our goal here is to work with people, to collaborate with different organizations that are there in India, other business schools, with the government, with industry. Because ultimately, we think that there is a huge task in India about building capacity. And whatever it is that we can do collaboratively with other institutions, that is what we will attempt to do. So whoever reaches out to us, or we'll also reach out to people proactively, because our goal ultimately is the same. We want to increase the skills in India, and that's what we would be going towards. All our actions will be geared towards.
Thank you. Thank you, Madan. Dr. Rajiv Kumar, we would have loved for this session to carry on, but I know you have another meeting that you mentioned, the cluster meeting in Delhi, which is again somewhat related to the topic that we're discussing. But some of our panelists from our next session, in fact, I think all of them have joined us here. You probably can see Professor Rishikesh Krishnan, Director of IIM Bangalore on screen. Professor Rudra Pratap, who's the Vice Chancellor of Plaksha University, is also on screen. We also have Professor Niharika Vora, who's the Vice Chancellor of Delhi Skill and Entrepreneurship University, is joined online. I'm going to request her to switch on her camera as well. And Professor Sudhir Krishnaswamy, who's the Vice Chancellor of National Law School, India University, Bangalore, is also online. Our next panel is on the future of education, transformation and disruptions. We will start that in just a minute, but I do want to sort of thank you very much on behalf of the Indian School of Business and all of us here for taking time out to sort of be with us this afternoon, for in some sense laying the foundation for a wonderful conversation today and on day 2, which is next week, but more importantly, giving us some actionable ideas for us to follow up. So in some sense, the onus is on us for in some sense to come back, and I'm sure we'll follow up. Madan, you want to say anything before we say goodbye to Sir?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Kumar, for taking your time. Very, very, very thought-provoking. And as I told you, there is something that you said that I've taken to heart, so we're going to do that. But you've thrown challenges out to us as people in higher education. And we hope, that we will rise to the challenge that you've thrown out for us. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Not at all. Most welcome. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.